Imagine Athens in the 6th century BCE, a bustling, evolving city teetering on the edge of transformation, yet deeply troubled by stark social and economic inequalities. In a time when the gap between the haves and the have-nots was widening, the very foundations of Athenian society were under strain. Amid these challenges, one man emerged with a vision that would not only relieve the suffering of many but also lay the groundwork for a new way of governing. His name was Solon. Solon was not born into privilege, nor did he rely solely on inherited power. He was a poet, a thinker, and ultimately a lawgiver who recognized that lasting change required more than just passing edicts. Observing a society where the rich dominated and the poor were crushed by debt and servitude, he understood that the prosperity of Athens depended on creating balance. A balance between economic opportunity and political inclusion, between tradition and necessary reform. At the heart of his transformative efforts was a radical initiative known as the reshaped, or shaking off of burdens. This reform was designed to relieve the common citizens from the crushing weight of debt. In an era when debt slavery was a common punishment for those unable to repay their loans, Solon took the bold step of abolishing such practices. By canceling debts and liberating those who had been forced into servitude, he not only provided immediate relief, but also struck at the very mechanism that allowed wealth and power to concentrate among a few. This act of economic reset was both courageous and controversial, challenging centuries of accepted practice and the established order of society. Yet Solon's vision extended far beyond economic relief. He recognized that true stability in Athens required a complete rethinking of its political structure. Prior to his interventions, political power was concentrated in the hands of a hereditary aristocracy that governed based on birth and wealth. Solon reimagined this system by linking political rights and responsibilities directly to one's economic status. He divided the citizens into 4 classes, each defined by the amount of wealth they possessed rather than by their family lineage. In doing so, he democratized political participation to a degree that had never before been seen. Even those who belonged to the lowest economic tier were granted a measure of political influence, a move that not only mitigated social tensions but also sowed the seeds of a more participatory future. Integral to his reforms was the belief that laws should serve the common good and be accessible to all citizens. Solon codified the laws of Athens and made them known to everyone, breaking away from the tradition of secret or arbitrary rulings reserved for the elite. By putting the law into writing, he established a framework of fairness and accountability, ensuring that justice was not a privilege of the powerful but a right of every Athenian. His legal reforms also sought to eliminate the cycle of vendettas and blood feuds that had long plagued the community. Instead of endless retribution, Solon introduced mechanisms designed to resolve conflicts in a more systematic and less destructive manner, promoting a culture of measured justice over impulsive revenge. This holistic approach, combining economic, legal, and political reforms, was revolutionary because it tackled the interlocking problems of Athenian society from multiple angles. Solon understood that poverty, injustice, and political disenfranchisement were not isolated issues. They were deeply intertwined, each exacerbating the others in a vicious cycle. His policies were designed to break that cycle by empowering individuals economically and politically, thereby creating a more resilient and cohesive society. The courage it took to implement such sweeping changes cannot be overstated. Solon's reforms were met with resistance from those who had long enjoyed unchallenged privilege, the aristocrats and wealthy landowners who saw their power being eroded. They were accustomed to a system where inheritance rather than merit or contribution dictated one's place in society. Yet, despite facing fierce opposition, Solon persevered. His steadfast commitment to the idea that justice must be accessible to all, and that a city's strength lies in the well-being of every citizen, drove him to enact reforms that, though imperfect, would echo throughout history. The impact of Solon's work was not limited to immediate relief for the downtrodden. It was a catalyst for long-term transformation. His economic reforms provided a temporary reprieve from the oppressive conditions that had led to widespread discontent, while his political innovations laid the groundwork for the development of democratic principles that would later come to define Athens. Over time, as subsequent leaders built upon his legacy, the seeds planted by Solon blossomed into a system of governance that valued participation and accountability, a system that remains a benchmark for democratic ideals even today. It is fascinating to consider how Solon's legacy continues to resonate in modern political thought. The idea that laws should be clear, public, and equally applicable to all citizens is now a cornerstone of contemporary legal systems around the globe. Likewise, the principle that political power should be derived from one's contributions to society, rather than inherited by virtue of birth, remains a powerful ideal in the ongoing struggle for social justice. In many ways, Solon's efforts were the first deliberate attempt to align the mechanics of government with the needs of the people, a revolutionary concept that set the stage for centuries of democratic evolution. Solon was also a poet, and his verses offer us a window into his soul, a soul deeply committed to the well-being of his fellow citizens. His poetry was not merely an artistic endeavor, but a vehicle for expressing his profound belief in the possibility of a better, more equitable society. Through his words, he communicated the urgency of reform and the hope that a reimagined social order could uplift all citizens. His dual identity as both a poet and a lawgiver illustrates a remarkable synthesis of art and governance, where eloquence and pragmatism came together to forge a path toward a more just community. The context in which Solon operated was one of dynamic change. Athens was transitioning from a relatively insular tribal community into a vibrant, cosmopolitan city-state. Increased trade, cultural exchange, and the challenges of managing a growing population all contributed to an environment ripe for transformation. In such a setting, traditional systems of governance, which had worked for generations, were no longer sufficient to address new and emerging issues. Solon's reforms were not an abrupt break from the past, but rather an evolution, a measured adaptation of old structures to meet the needs of a changing world. His sensitivity to the balance between continuity and innovation ensured that his reforms were both progressive and grounded in the realities of his time. One cannot overlook the delicate balance Solon maintained between appeasing entrenched interests and meeting the urgent demands of a restless populace. His reforms represented a compromise, a recognition that while radical change was necessary, it had to be implemented in a way that did not completely destabilize society. In abolishing debt slavery, he addressed the immediate suffering of the masses. In restructuring the political system, he created a platform for broader participation without alienating the influential. This balancing act required not only political acumen but also an empathetic understanding of human nature, a willingness to see the world not just as a series of problems to be solved, but as a community of individuals with hopes, fears, and aspirations. Over time, the influence of Solon's reforms would become apparent in every facet of Athenian life. They inspired a tradition of public debate and civic engagement that set Athens on a course toward democracy. Later reformers and statesmen, while differing in their methods and ideas, built upon the foundation that Solon had established. His emphasis on fairness and accountability became a touchstone for future generations, and his example demonstrated that a thoughtful, inclusive approach to governance could yield benefits that far outweighed the costs of resistance and short-term instability. In reflecting on Solon's achievements, one is struck by the clarity of his vision and the practicality of his approach. He recognized that the prosperity of Athens depended not solely on the accumulation of wealth by a privileged few, but on the collective strength of a society in which every citizen had the opportunity to contribute and prosper. His reforms were a testament to the idea that sustainable progress is rooted in the well-being of the community as a whole, a lesson that remains as relevant today as it was over 2.5 millennia ago. Even as centuries have passed and the world has transformed in countless ways, the core challenges that Solon sought to address persist. Economic disparity, political exclusion, and the concentration of power continue to be pressing issues in societies around the globe. Yet the enduring nature of his ideas offers hope and guidance. Solon's legacy reminds us that meaningful reform is possible when leaders have the courage to confront injustice head-on and the wisdom to design solutions that address the root causes of inequality. His story is an invitation to all who seek to build a fairer society, to look back at history not with resignation, but with the conviction that progress is a continuous journey. The lessons of Solon's life are many. They tell us that the struggle for justice is not confined to any single era. It is a universal challenge that calls upon each generation to act with both compassion and resolve. His reforms, grounded in a deep respect for human dignity and a clear-eyed assessment of societal needs, serve as a powerful reminder that even the most deeply entrenched systems can be reshaped by visionary leadership. They teach us that change, however daunting it may seem, begins with the willingness to re-examine our assumptions and to forge a path that benefits all, not just a select few. In the grand tapestry of history, the story of Solon stands out as a beacon of hope, a demonstration of how one man's commitment to justice and equality can set in motion a process of transformation that reverberates through the ages. His vision was not limited by the constraints of his time. It was a forward-looking blueprint for a society where every citizen's voice mattered, where laws were not instruments of oppression but tools for achieving a common good, and where economic opportunity was a shared right rather than an exclusive privilege. As we ponder the legacy of Solon, we are invited to consider the enduring power of ideas and the impact they can have when combined with decisive action. His life and work remind us that history is not a fixed series of events, but a dynamic conversation between the past and the present, a conversation in which the lessons of one era can illuminate the challenges of another. Solon's reforms were a catalyst for change in his own time, and their influence continues to inform our understanding of justice, governance, and the potential for human progress. In the end, the story of Solon and his sweeping reforms is a testament to the enduring belief that every society can be improved if its leaders are willing to confront inequality, challenge entrenched interests, and envision a future where the rights and responsibilities of citizenship are shared by all. His legacy is a reminder that the quest for a more just and equitable world is never complete. It is a continual process of reflection, reform, and renewal. And in this ongoing journey, the example of Solon shines brightly, a timeless call to action for all who believe in the transformative power of ideas and the unyielding human spirit.